What if I told you that everything we are today, every thought, every tool, every civilization came from a time when humans weren't even fully human? A time when survival meant smashing bones with stone and making fire felt like magic. This isn't just ancient history. This is the story that created you, me, and everything we call modern life. Millions of years ago, before the first whisper of language, before fire had a name or gods had meaning, the earth belonged to silence, wind, and hunger. And across the endless African plains wandered creatures who were almost human, but not yet aware of the storm of destiny growing inside their bones. They lived in a world filled with terror. Giant cats with saber teeth crouched in tall grass. Hyenas screamed through the night like demons, and every dawn brought a fight for water and food beneath a brutal, merciless sky. Yet in the middle of that chaos, one of those ape-like beings with dark eyes full of fear and instinct picked up a stone, not as a rock, but as a weapon, a sharp flake broken by accident that cut clean into the flesh of a carcass. And in that single small motion, the entire history of humanity was set in motion without a sound. That chipped piece of stone became a gateway to things no animal had ever known. The taste of hidden marrow, the warmth of a fire they had not yet controlled, the idea that the world could be changed by their own hands. Those first stone tools were not pretty, not planned, but they allowed those creatures, perhaps Australopithecus, to eat differently, to grow stronger, to live a little longer, and that extra survival time turned into more energy, which fed their brains, which began to grow in silence. Generation after generation, these creatures struck stone against stone, again and again. Everything they needed in life, depending on the sharpness of that broken edge. Some died with stones in hand. Some lived a bit longer because of it, and the knowledge of how to make sharp tools flowed from parent to child, not with words, but with hands mimicking hands, sparks of understanding hidden beneath the skin. Slowly, very slowly, this instinct turned into intention. A new species appeared, Homo habilis, with hands more skillful, with eyes that studied how to shape a stone before hitting it, who made not just one flake but several, turning stones into knives, scrapers, cutters, teaching each other silently in camps full of bone fragments and cracked skulls. They became the first truly technological beings, though they didn't know it, and the savanna around them was filled with danger and chance. Lightning setting grass on fire, vultures circling over half-eaten zebra corpses, leopards dragging kills into trees. These beings learned to wait, to chase predators away with stones, to smash bones and steal nutrition from scavenged kills. Every day was violent, full of mud, blood, and desperation, but each day they became more human in ways they couldn't see. Over tens of thousands of years, the winds of evolution shaped their bodies and minds into something even more powerful. Homo erectus, tall, upright, fierce, with fire in their minds before fire in their hands. These beings discovered how to hold fire, to keep embers alive with dry grass, to sit near flames at night as sparks swirled like spirits around them. Imagine that scene. Dark sky covered with stars, a crackling flame in the middle, shadows dancing on the faces of beings who could barely speak, but had begun to feel a kind of belonging. Around that fire, mothers fed soft-cooked meat to their children. Elders guarded the edges of camp with stones ready to throw, and young hunters stared into the firelight and felt something new, a strange awareness, a mental light flickering inside. They carved massive hand axes out of stone, so perfectly shaped that modern scientists are still amazed. Those axes were not random, they were symmetrical tools built with skill and intention, used to cut down the toughest hide, chop trees, butcher elephants 2 or 3 times their size. Homo erectus became unstoppable wanderers. They left Africa, crossed valleys, climbed mountains, followed rivers into lands no primate had ever seen, carrying their hand axes like the symbol of a new kind of creature. Their shoulders evolved to throw spears so far that animals began to fear them. Their legs grew longer and stronger for running down prey under the hot sun, and their brains grew larger, making them smarter, more social, more strategic. They shared food. They hunted in groups. They protected each other's children. They probably had no real language, but they had sounds, signals, emotions they could feel in each other's eyes. Their camps were full of butchered bones, cracked skulls, fire pits, and stone tools scattered like the fingerprints of their rising intelligence. When storms came and lightning struck the land, they may have feared the sky gods they didn't yet understand, but they still held their stone axes tightly. Over hundreds of thousands of years, they shaped not just stone, but themselves. Those stones became extensions of their bodies, their minds, their survival. Every chipped flake carried the memory of 1,000 ancestors who had learned to make it. And somewhere deep in their long journey, in a world of hunting and hunger, something truly terrifying happened. Thought was born. Imagination started to grow quietly inside the brain of a creature that hadn't even discovered farming or speech. This was the first quiet dawn of humanity, born not in language or cities, but in the sound of stone against stone, echoing across a wild, merciless world. And though they died without knowing what they had begun, that first moment of using a stone to change the world was the beginning of every tool, every fire, every invention, every story, every kingdom, and every dream that would ever come. Hundreds of thousands of years after Homo erectus first carried fire through the darkness, the earth trembled under the feet of newer beings, creatures whose skulls were thicker, whose bodies were shaped for the cold, who survived winter storms in the dark forests of Europe and hunted mammoths with stone-tipped spears. These were the Neanderthals, a distant branch of our family tree, powerful, silent, and deeply connected to the land they ruled. They lived in caves where the wind howled like spirits through the night, lighting fires that kept wolves away, sharpening spears with stone scrapers, teaching their children how to hunt by feeling the heartbeat of the earth beneath their bare feet. Their lives were short, brutal, and sacred. They buried their dead with flowers and red ochre, the iron-rich, blood-colored dust of the earth, as if they sensed that death was not just an ending, but a doorway to another realm. They made necklaces of animal teeth and carved mysterious patterns into bones, leaving behind signs not just of survival, but of something deeper: ritual, meaning, memory. And while they lived in the frozen north, in another corner of the world, a new species was slowly emerging under the hot African sun: Homo sapiens, our ancestors, more delicate in body than Neanderthals, but with minds that burned with imagination and restlessness. These early humans gathered in small bands around flickering campfires, painting their dreams onto cave walls with red ochre and charcoal, leaving behind handprints like ghostly signatures for the future, proof that they understood not just how to hunt and eat, but how to remember. They carved tiny figures from ivory and bone. They etched patterns into stone, perhaps telling stories with symbols no one alive today can fully read. The world was changing as ice ages came and went, glaciers crawling across the land like slow white beasts, devouring forests and plains. As the climate shifted, Homo sapiens began to wander out of Africa, following rivers, crossing deserts, building rafts from wood and fiber to travel across seas, stepping foot into lands where no human had ever stood. They met Neanderthals in the dark forests of Europe, sometimes fighting, sometimes sharing fire, sometimes merging their blood, so that a tiny piece of Neanderthal would live on in every human forever. The two species exchanged more than stone tools. They exchanged part of their souls. All across Asia, Denisovans and other mysterious humans were also living, surviving in caves high in the mountains, leaving behind fragments of DNA hidden in our blood, even today, like ancient whispers inside our genes. As Homo sapiens spread outward, they moved as if guided by an unseen force. Curiosity, hunger, maybe even destiny. Crafting sharper weapons, creating spear throwers, inventing the bow, learning how to trap animals, turning the chaos of the world into patterns they could control. They began to sing around the fire, their voices echoing into the night, sky-like prayers, and they painted animals in motion on cave walls, lions, bison, horses, hunting scenes, not just to remember, but perhaps to connect with something spiritual, to call on the spirit of the hunt before the spear struck flesh. Mothers wrapped their newborns in furs. Fathers taught sons how to track a deer by its faint footprint in the mud. and some young woman, somewhere under a sky filled with stars, may have looked up and wondered why the world even existed at all. They believed in spirits, in magic, in something beyond the life they could see. They placed beads around the necks of the dead, laid them in graves with tools, perhaps believing that the journey continued beyond death. Over time, the numbers of Homo sapiens grew larger than any other human species. They were clever, social, adaptable, and as their clans moved through Europe and Asia, the Neanderthals slowly vanished, not wiped out in a great war, but through slow waves of replacement, interbreeding, and maybe famine or disease that came along with the newcomers. And so, the world that once held many kinds of human slowly became the world of one, our kind. But the memory of those others lived on in the shape of our skulls, in the curve of a brow ridge, in a strand of DNA. As the planet stirred with glaciers melting and forests returning, humans became the masters of every climate. They built shelters from mammoth bones, canoes from tree trunks, and they walked across land bridges into places no one had ever seen. They reached the freezing tundra of Siberia, the islands of Indonesia, the coasts of Australia, and eventually the vast unknown of the Americas. Everywhere they went, they carried fire, tools, dreams, and the stories of their ancestors, told in whispers around the flames. And beneath all the hunting and traveling and surviving, something else was growing quietly inside them. Memory, art, desire, language, imagination. They were no longer just animals surviving day by day. They were becoming storytellers, artists, travelers of both land and mind. They left stone spear points in the mud beside rivers. They carved bone needles to sew warm clothing. They made musical instruments from bird bones that sang like the wind itself. And when the nights were long and cold, they looked at the stars and perhaps wondered if their dead were watching them from somewhere beyond. This was the time when humanity truly awakened, not just to survive, but to ask questions, to create, to remember. And all across the endless wild, the firelight flickered in thousands of camps, illuminating the faces of people who were still primitive and brutal and vulnerable, yet somehow already dreaming of something more. As the grinding ice sheets slowly retreated and the winds of a warmer age began to shape the earth once again, humanity stood on the edge of a new transformation. No longer just hunters chasing herds across vast, empty plains, but people who began to understand the silent rhythm of the land beneath their feet, watching seeds fall into soil and grow back where they had once gathered them, realizing that food could be summoned from the earth itself if given time and care, and thus began the slow, quiet birth of farming. In the ancient hills of the Middle East, small bands of once nomadic humans settled for longer periods, building humble stone shelters, storing the grains they harvested in pits, grinding them to make food that lasted through the winter. Their children no longer forced to wander from one dying animal to the next. These early people, the Natufians, gathered in larger groups than ever before, sleeping near the same fire year after year, domesticating the first dogs to guard their camps and help them hunt, learning to plant the wild barley and wheat around them. And for the first time in human history, food began to come from the same place where they slept. In distant lands across the world, other humans who had never met these tribes were discovering the same secret in their own way. People in ancient China began to pat down water-filled paddies and to bend their backs under the sun planting rice shoots. Across the seas in the forests of Mesoamerica, humans learned to plant maize, beans, and chilies. In South America, they began growing potatoes and raising llamas, while in Africa, others tended sorghum and millet. And everywhere, the wild world was slowly being carved into human territory. As crops grew and animals were tamed, humans stayed in one place long enough that children were born and raised in the same homes. Elders died surrounded by their descendants. Families buried their dead beneath the floors of their houses, and a new kind of connection to the land was formed. Ownership, ancestry, belonging. Villages began to appear made of mud and stone. Granaries filled with harvested grains replaced the old uncertain kilns, and people who once carved stone blades to cut animal flesh now made sickles to harvest golden fields waving in the wind. With more food than ever before, populations grew, and people discovered that not everyone needed to hunt or farm. Some could spend their entire lives making flint arrowheads, weaving baskets, carving bone, shaping pottery, or guiding the spiritual life of the tribe. Artisans, merchants, shamans, elders, leaders, society itself began to divide into roles. Trade routes formed between villages. Shells, obsidian, and beads traveled farther than any single hunter could walk in a day. And even though stone tools were still used, especially sharp blades of obsidian which could slice even flesh cleaner than metal, something even more revolutionary began to emerge deep in the firelit workshops of early settlements: copper. In certain places where copper lay pure in the ground like veins of green-red metal, humans learned they could hammer it into shape, making beads, hooks, and small tools. But that was just the beginning. Someone discovered that if you placed certain rocks into a strong fire, the metal hidden inside would melt and run out like glowing liquid. And this incredible revelation sparked the first true metalworking. The first copper knives and axes were softer than stone, but precious and different. And as knowledge spread, so did innovation. When copper was combined with tin, the world entered the Bronze Age, a time of new weapons and tools that left stone behind forever in the great centers of civilization. Bronze axes cut wood faster, bronze plows carved deeper into soil. Bronze swords gave warriors a terrifying new advantage, and this powerful new material changed everything. The Stone Age, which had lasted for over 3 million years, began to fade as villages became towns, towns became walled cities, agriculture became organized, and humans no longer depended on nature alone, but shaped it to their will. People built temples to gods carved from the same earth they once feared, wrote the first symbols on clay tablets to count grain and livestock, formed armies, erected stone monuments, and dreamed of things that could only exist in settled, civilized life. Yet even as bronze shone in the sun and civilizations rose, in many parts of the world people still knapped flint into blades and used hand axes passed down from ancestors, proof that the Stone Age never truly disappeared. It simply evolved into something else. But the revolution of farming and metal had set humanity on an unstoppable path toward everything that would one day become history, and all of it was born out of the same ancient hands that once struck two stones together and lit the first spark of what it means to be human. Even though the Stone Age has vanished into the dust of time, and we now live surrounded by machines and screens, it is still alive inside each of us, burned into our blood like a secret memory of fire, hunger, survival, and wonder. We still feel echoes of those ancient days when our ancestors struck stones together to make a spark, when they stared into the glowing coals and dreamed of something greater than themselves, when every tool, every hunt, every birth, and every death brought them one step closer to becoming human. We might sit in cities today, speaking languages, building rockets, and writing books, but inside our hearts, the same primal force still burns. The urge to create, to explore, to protect our loved ones, to find meaning in a world that is both beautiful and unforgiving. And every act of courage or innovation we show today was born from that first moment when an unknown creature picked up a stone and refused to be just another animal ruled by fear. The Stone Age was not just a period of history, it was the birthplace of human identity, the forge of our imagination, the silent teacher that shaped our hands, our brains, our communities, and our souls for more than 3 million years. Its legacy is still there whenever we hold a blade, build a shelter, light a campfire, tell a story to children, or look up at the stars and ask who we are and where we came from. The people who lived and died in that age are gone, their voices lost to time, their faces turned to dust. But because of them, we stand here today, alive, thinking, creating, and dreaming further than they ever could. And perhaps somewhere deep in our beating hearts, they still live on, whispering through our instincts that no matter how far we rise, we must never forget that once, long ago, we held the world in our hands through a simple broken stone,